Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, Plants in Tropical Spaces. My name is June. I'm a plant and gardening content writer living in Lagos, Nigeria. I write about enlivening living spaces with tropical plants, and my aim is to inspire a do-it-yourself gardening culture in my community. Now in Lagos where I live, in Lagos, Nigeria, gardening sometimes is perceived as an expensive hobby because plants are not cheap. You have some inexpensive plants, but you also have the rare and expensive plants. You also have to buy pots and planters, you have to buy soil, and you have to buy potting mixes. Now, so today I would like to share with you how I make my inexpensive potting mix from locally available materials. So let's get started. We need cocoa peat, compost, garden soil or sharp sand, and then occasionally I also use charcoal. Now, what is cocoa peat? Now, cocoa peat is an organic material made from coconut husks. The husk is crushed and the fibers separated, and then the peat is removed and then compressed and made into blocks, which is the form in which we buy it. And so in order to use it, we have to decompress the blocks and in water to be able to get a material like this. The block of cocoa peat, the standard size is a 5 kg block, and you need about 20 liters of water to decompress it. So the cocoa peat absorbs the water and expands in capacity. So when it's fully expanded, the 5 kg block is fully expanded, you can get a 75 liter volume of cocoa peat. So that's a lot of material to work with. Now, cocoa peat is very different from peat moss, peat moss is decayed sphagnum moss. And sphagnum moss is a species of moss found in wetlands and bogs. Now, the UK, which has one of the largest deposits of sphagnum moss in the world, has recently discouraged the use of sphagnum moss and peat moss in the horticulture industry. But that's not to be confused with our cocoa peat, which is made from coconut husk, and coconut husk is the byproduct or the waste product of the coconut industry. So this is really a sustainable use of some waste material. So not to confuse cocoa peat with peat moss. So I said in my garden mix, I use cocoa peat, sand, garden soil, and compost. And I use them in equal proportions depending on what I'm mixing. So let's talk about this components one by one. Now, cocoa peat has a moisture retaining property. The large particles allow air flow between them, and so it's light and fluffy for the plant's roots. It also absorbs and retains moisture, which the plants need to grow healthy. Now, it's also a sustainable substitute for soil, because sometimes you could use only cocoa peat and compost without using soil as well. The reason you could do this is because cocoa peat is light, and so if you wanted to move your plants in and out, then garden soil, which may be heavy, you can just replace or substitute that with cocoa peat. So it's light and it's easy to move around. Another benefit of using cocoa peat is that it's free from weeds. So unlike garden soil, which will contain soil microorganisms and other larger organisms like snails or snails' eggs, earthworms, insects, which are good, okay, in the garden because they aerate the soil as they move around. But if you pot in your plants for indoor use, you probably don't want to introduce these pests or organisms in your indoor space. I mean, they're fine. Earthworms are fine in the soil because, after all, they would rather be in the soil than be outside the soil. So that's fine. But cocoa peat does not contain weed seeds because it's the process of producing it gives you a mostly sterile medium. So you can use cocoa peat to plant seeds and seedlings, and then you don't have the fear that the weeds or pests will compete with your young plants. I mean, so that's one of the benefits of using cocoa peat. Now, garden soil. So I said we could use garden soil, but if you don't want to use garden soil, you could use sand. Sharp sand. Now, sharp sand is one of the components of soil. Soil contains sand in different sizes, clay and silt, and also organic matter. So the proportion of each of these materials in your soil will determine what kind of soil you have, whether it's going to be loamy soil or clay soil or sandy soil. Now, the advantage of sandy soil is that it drains very quickly because you have these large particles and it allows air and water flow quickly through it. The disadvantage of that is that it also dries out very quickly. Now, you can't plant in sand alone because it's doesn't the particles don't stick together, so you can't compress it, and the roots can't hold on to it, and it can't keep the plant upright. It also dries out very quickly, so the plant wouldn't have enough moisture when they need it. So what you can do is mix sand, that's sharp sand, with cocoa peat, and you can get a moisture retaining, fast draining material. So far, we've talked about moisture retention from cocoa peat and then fast draining from sand, the large particles of sand. And the next thing is compost. Now, the sand and the cocoa peat together don't have any nutrients. So that's where compost comes in. So what is compost? Compost is recycled plant material. Compost, everything that's compost was once a plant. So it's made from plant-based kitchen waste and garden waste. So you have your leaves, branches, stems, fruits, whatever. Everything that was once a plant can be used in making compost. And it's broken down. I make my compost myself. I just bag it up and then let it decompose. It takes about a year for this to happen. It's a slow process for me because I don't do anything special to let it break down. I just allow nature take its course. Insects also help to break that down. But for commercially produced compost, they have to aerate the pile to get oxygen into it, and then it speeds up the process. So compost can be made a little faster when produced commercially. Now, the important thing to know about compost is that it doesn't have any bad smell. It just breaks down normally. Even while making compost, I don't have any bad smell in my garden while making compost. So all your materials that were plant tissue form this material that go back to nourishing your new plants. So it's interesting, and I think it's a sustainable use of resources when we make compost, or when we allow our garden waste to be used in making compost that will go back into feeding our soil. So you can buy your compost locally so that you just cut down the cost of your gardening. Now, so to make potting mix, I have my moisture retaining cocoa peat and my drainage from the soil, from sand, and then I have compost that nourishes this whole medium to nourish my plants. Another material I use in my potting mix is charcoal. Now, depending on what I'm planting, I could use charcoal to form a drainage layer at the bottom of the nursery pot so that it covers the holes and prevents these materials from going through. And in some cases, it actually prevents the materials from plugging the drainage holes if the drainage holes are small. So that forms that drainage layer. Charcoal is made from wood that has been burnt without oxygen, and so you get charcoal. It's a lightweight material as well, and it has tiny pore spaces in it or on the surface that hold moisture for the plant, hold moisture and air for the plants. So that's used for charcoal. It's used a lot in in potting orchids and epiphytes. So bromeliads, I use charcoal for bromeliads and orchids. So a quick recap, how do I make my inexpensive potting mix? I use cocoa peat, sharp sand, and compost. The cocoa peat adds the moisture or retains moisture in the mix. The sharp sand helps with drainage, so it allows air and water flow through it. And then the compost nourishes the mix that will nourish my plants. So thanks for watching. I hope you found this video useful, and if you did, please do like and comment to encourage me to do more videos like this, and also share it with others. I mean, so that gardening can be fun and people can enjoy the gardening without breaking the bank. So until the next video then, bye. Before you go, I want to give you a quick demonstration of the density of these materials. Here I have garden soil on the left and Cocopeat on the right. I made a hole at the bottom of each of the cups so that water can seep in. The garden soil settles at the bottom quickly, but the Cocopeat, which is light and airy, floats about. Sand also settles quickly, absorbing water and displacing air. It drains very quickly too. Now, here are charcoal pieces floating in water, demonstrating their low density. Finally, here's how a mix of garden soil, compost and Cocopeat perform in water. Light, airy, but absorbs water quickly to displace air. When the water dries up, air returns to the mix. And that's what makes plants' roots happy. Happy gardening!